FCE President Ali Haddad has met with the Minister of Water Resources Hussein Nasib as part of his series of meetings with government officials. Assurances by Prime Minister Abdelmalek Salal about the shale gas project seem to have had little impact on the residents of Ain Salah. An Egyptian court has ordered the release of Mubarak's sons from detention. Those were today's top stories. Thank you for joining us on Dzair News Channel. We start our news from the south, where dozens of Ain Salah citizens in the province of Tamaras took to the streets to protest against the ongoing shale gas drilling in the region and calling on the relevant authorities to take firm measures to stop the drilling operations. Apparently, the locals of Ain Salah were not totally convinced by the Prime Minister's statements regarding the unconventional natural resources. According to our correspondent there, Abdelkader Kharbouch, the current demonstrations will not stop unless a firm decision is taken to end the exploration of shale gas in the Algerian Sahara.
The exploration phase shall not be done by the same company which is in charge of the drilling. This is unacceptable. People need only one thing: the immediate stopping of all exploration of shale gas. The declaration of Prime Minister Salal are not convincing at all. We need an official decision for the stopping of the exploration of shale gas. It must stop by any means. This is our slogan.
Previously, Prime Minister Abdelmalek Salal stated for the first time his opinion about the ongoing unrest and protest movement in the south of Algeria when he was a guest in the Algerian state TV. Salal reassured the citizens of the south, saying that the shale gas is not scheduled in the government's agenda and that the country could go on until 2013 without drilling shale gas. Lamia Al-Shosh illustrates.
Prime Minister Abdelmalek Salal's address to the residents of the south of Algeria was broadcast on the Algerian state TV after a long-lasting silence which planted doubts about the future of the current government and the validity of its choices to save national economy. After stating his opinion for the first time about the shale gas protest in the south in his social media account, Salal did not hide the worries of the executive body about the international oil crisis, declaring at the same time the maintaining of the state's strategic projects and its social welfare policy.
What is sure today is that oil prices will not likely go back up to $120 per barrel. The IMF said that oil prices will not exceed $59.7 per barrel in 2015. It is not until 2019 that it will reach $77.56 in estimation. This is what is anticipated, and we have established the next 5-year plan based on this hypothesis. It appears to me that we have not mistaken because we have taken our precautions.
The Prime Minister, in response to questions about the government's strategy about shale gas, sent reassuring messages to the public opinion, saying that the young generation is the decisive one about the drilling of shale gas, calling for unity and pulling together to best serve the interests of the country.
To reassure our brothers in the south, shale gas drilling is not yet scheduled in the government's roadmap. We are in the phase of study which will last for the next 4 years. Until then, things will be clear. Today we do not need shale gas. We can do without it until 2030.
However, would the Premier's statements of reassurance have an echo in the boiling south of Algeria, or would it not count in halting the protests?
In another matter now, the president of the Heads of Enterprises Forum, business magnate Ali Haddad, has met with the Minister of Water Resources Hussein Nasib as part of a series of meetings in order to promote the organization and its ambitious programs. Previously, Mr. Ali Haddad met with the Speaker of the Upper House of Parliament of the Council of Nations, Abdul Qadir bin Salah. The meeting mainly consisted of laying a greater emphasis on the role of both public and private companies to spur socio-economic growth here in Algeria. In the scope of preparing for the 5th round of the Inter-Malian dialogue, Foreign Minister Mtala Mamra received the Malian delegation led by his Malian counterpart, Abdullah Diop. Mr. Abdullah Diop noted that Algeria plays a major role to gather the Malian feuding parties by persuading them to put an end to the bloody civil war in their country.
The violent clashes that occurred in the north of the country of Mali and where there were many human losses, especially Malians, is really sad. I extremely regret what happened, and I hope that once the negotiations to bring peace in the area will start, no more Malians will have to be killed until we find an agreement. That's why this conflict needs to be managed and give the chance for the political process to have again the control in the area, and this is why we are here today.
In cultural news, the Ministry of Mujahideen or Revolution Fighters handed over 22 historical documentaries about the Algerian Glorious Revolution to the Algerian state-run TV. These documentaries range in themes from the path of the revolution to the colonial behavior, notably the torture practices in prisons and detention camps. Lamia Ashoush again.
The process of writing history goes through the well-preservation of archaic material after collecting it from its different sources. Media and telecommunication is one of the most important means to preserve the memory.
The opportunity has reinvented itself to renew cooperation and deepen it between the Ministries of Communication and Mujahideen. We are pleased to deliver to the State TV a set of 22 documentaries, awaiting to deliver more of them in the near future.
In this regard, the Ministries of Communication and Mujahideen, or Revolution Fighters, are cooperating to hand over 22 historical documentaries to the Algerian State TV, which will contribute a great deal in making the Algerian Glorious Revolution known to the public opinion.
The relation is solid with the Ministry of Mujahideen. Before this initiative, where they offered us 22 documentaries, they had another initiative, which is the Prize of the Sons of November, which 10 journalists took home.
The themes of the documentaries ranged from the documentation of some historical figures, the battles of the Revolution Army, as well as the participation of the different components of society in the struggle for liberation, notwithstanding the atrocities committed by the French colonizers, notably in prisons and detention camps. These kinds of initiatives are important in a sense that they push historical researchers to delve deeper into the secrets and depth of the glorious Algerian Revolution.
10 years ago, investments in olive oil production in the Algerian north-central province of Djelfa proved to be successful and fruitful. However, Djelfa farmers are more ambitious about, despite some difficulties they face, such as power and water shortages. Nadia Qasmi has more.
Growing olives is actually a new challenging experience in the Algerian north-central province of Djelfa, which proved to be a successful one though. It has even attracted the attention of so many farmers and a modest support from the local authorities of the area.
Concerning the growth of olives here in Djelfa, statistics and numbers show that it is a successful agricultural investment. In 2000, we used to have 129 hectares. The space production devoted for this production was 40 hectares. In the farming year of 2013 and 2014, we reached more than 9,000 hectares. The production area is more than 5,000 hectares.
Despite its success, farmers in Djelfa face some difficulties and obstacles which go against a better olive oil production, and in the top list we find power and water problems in addition to less than well working force.
We face a problem of water shortage. Some of us need electricity. We are looking for more support from the government and local authorities. We are spending our own money in olive oil production.
However, Dzair is ranked as the 10th Algerian province in the olive oil production, which used to be a huge challenge 10 years ago. But now it became a reality because of the perseverance of farmers.
The inflation rate in Algeria eased in 2014 to 2.9% from a rate of 3.3% recorded in 2013, according to the National Office of Statistics, which notes that the rate is lower than the forecast made in the latest finance bill, which predicted a 3.5% inflation. More on the topic with Mohamed Barazwan.
By category of products, the inflation rate for consumer food prices increased by 3.9% in 2014 against 3.25% in 2013 and more than 12% in 2012. Indeed, the prices of fresh agricultural produce soared by 5.26% last year against 4.02% in 2013 and 21.32% in 2012, the public body in charge of statistics added. Last year, the prices of the industrial food products also increased by nearly 2.6% against 2.4% in 2013, although this change remained less important in comparison, with a 4.67% increase recorded in 2012. However, for manufactured goods, the inflation rate declined as prices rose by only 1.2% in 2014 against 2.0% in 2013. Asked about the downward trend of inflation recorded by Algeria over the last 10 years, with the exception of 2012, when prices soared at close to 9.0%, economists considered that this trend represented the result of the monetary stability of the country. Over the last 10 years, the country's inflation rate has decelerated thanks to a good management of the monetary policy, according to Mr. Mikidash, an economist and vice president of the National Economic and Social Council, CNES. This rate constitutes good news, especially during this economic situation, marked by lower fiscal revenues of the country caused by falling oil prices, he said, adding that the Bank of Algeria had initiated an effective monetary policy to control the inflation. He also stressed that insufficient monetary control policy would make less acute the current financial woes of the country.
The Algerian authorities will proceed to deport back the Nigerian families who settled illegally in the south of Algeria for several months to their home country. The first motive of these families to flee their mother country was the ravaging civil war that is tearing the Niger apart. Shakib Louishi illustrates.
Hundreds of Nigerian families who fled their country because of a devastating civil war and tried to find shelter illegally in neighboring Algeria are getting ready to go back to their mother country, Niger. The family of Yaqub al-Hussein is one of these families who will soon leave Algeria after several months. Thank God we were really well welcomed here in Algeria. I have spent here 7 months. With the cooperation of the Algerian authorities and the Nigerian one in Niamey, hundreds of families are about to be reported back, and more than 400 families were gathered in Tamanrasset Transit Center. Today, we have received many families, 400 from the province of Ouargla and 3 others from the province of Adrar. Terrible and difficult conditions have obliged these families to flee their country after clashes started between the Nigerian government forces and armed militia that tore the country apart. For that purpose, the deporting of these families to their mother country is psychologically hard to accept. Consequently, the Algerian authorities has deployed the necessary medical staff in order to take care of them. For those who have health problems, we take care of them here in the spot. But if it is something urgent, we immediately transfer them to the nearest hospital. Despite the illegal settling of these families, which shows the current situation in the neighboring African countries ravaged by wars, giving assistance to them and provide help is one of the most important things Algeria has ever vowed for.
Moving on to our international news. A parliament set up in Libya to rival the elected assembly has suspended UN-brokered peace talks because of what it called fresh violence from the country's recognized government, a spokesman said on Wednesday. More details with Nadia Qasmi.
Last week, the United Nations launched a new round of talks in Geneva aimed at diffusing the oil producers' violent struggle between the two governments and parliaments vying for control for years after ousting of Muammar Gaddafi. The rival assembly, known as the General National Congress, was set up after an armed group called Libya Dawn seized the capital Tripoli last summer. The internationally recognized Prime Minister Abdullah Athini transferred his government to the east. However, GNC spokesman Omar Hameidan said representatives of the Tripoli Assembly would not now take part in any UN-sponsored talks, accusing troops allied to the opposing government of storming a central bank branch in the eastern city of Benghazi and other acts of violence. Both sides, which are allied to armed factions, have been fighting over territory and oil ports and have sought to take charge of the central bank to control vital oil revenues. Troops loyal to Athini took over the central bank branch in Benghazi after expelling Islamist fighters from the area. On Sunday, the GNC has accepted the UN dialogue so long as the meeting took place in Libya, not Geneva. But Hameidan made clear that the Tripoli Assembly no longer had any intention of taking part in the talks regardless of where they were held. Rival factions had attended the talks in Switzerland, but key representatives from the self-declared government and the associated parliament in Tripoli stayed away.
Elsewhere now, an Egyptian court has ordered the release of the sons of the overthrown President Hosni Mubarak from detention, pending their retrial in a corruption case. Mubarak's eldest son, Ala, was a businessman, while his youngest son, Gamal, was a senior official in the ruling party and widely tipped to succeed his father before popular protests brought down the regime in 2011. Moving on to Europe now. Reeling from the Paris terror attacks, France announced brand new measures to fight homegrown terrorism, like giving police better equipment and hiring more intelligence agents, as European officials sought to strike the right balance between rushing through tough counter-terrorism laws and protecting treasured democratic rights. Karim Faz-Zakri has more.
New sweeping measures to counter homegrown extremism announced by the French government are not enough to deal with longer-term social divisions within the country. That was the warning from French Prime Minister Manuel Valls as he presented his multi-million euro package to Parliament following the recent terrorist attacks in Paris.
I don't forget that before the tragic events that we went through, we had a problem of exclusion in society, which doesn't only concern urban centres. And there was a more general feeling felt by some of being left on the outside, an identity crisis and crisis of confidence towards public officials and the powerful elite. All of these elements remain, despite the recent show of solidarity by the people of France.
Over 3 years, nearly 2,700 people will be recruited, many into security. More than 400 million euros will be invested in new equipment, including better weapons, and surveillance will be stepped up on suspects. But there are also to be 60 extra Muslim clerics to be employed in prisons to deter radicalism among inmates. It is one of the Prime Minister's new measures, which recognizes that tackling the problem before it develops may offer more protection.
Still in Europe, the EU wants a quick decision on a new law that will force governments to share air passenger data. The draft bill, first proposed in 2011, is being looked at again after the Paris attacks amid fears about returning terrorists from Syria. A committee of MPs rejected the legislation in 2013. Karim Faz-Zakri again.
The EU wants a quick decision on a new law that will force governments to share air passenger data. The draft bill, first proposed in 2011, is being looked at again after the Paris attacks amid fears about returning jihadists from Syria. A committee of MEPs rejected the legislation in 2013. Senior officials also want tougher checks on the EU's external borders.
We will step up our efforts to come to an agreement with Council and European Parliament on a system whereby we exchange passenger information between member states, on improving the working of the Schengen area, and on increasing our legislation on data protection. So we will step up our efforts politically, but I think the response should be determined, measured, and also well thought through. There's no need for a knee-jerk reaction now. That will not help the situation.
The threat posed by ISIL has reignited the debate over how to fight terror. But civil liberties campaigners say the collection and sharing of passenger data across Europe is a step too far, and that some governments might be tempted to misuse it.
In the latest on the Ukrainian file, at least 13 people have been killed after a trolley bus was shelled in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk, hours after calls for ceasefire at a meeting in Berlin.
At least 9 people are reported dead after a shell or mortar hit a bus stop in the rebel-held city of Donetsk in eastern Ukraine. Many sources put the death toll at 13. This was the second deadly bus blast in the east in as many weeks, a cruel reminder of reality on the ground after diplomatic progress and international talks on the crisis.
We heard the blast and ran here. We saw the bus was destroyed. The car had exploded. There were lots of dead bodies. There was a wounded man on the bus. He was asking for help.
It is unclear who was behind the fire, said to have wounded around 20 people. Ukraine's defense ministry was quick to blame the separatists. Fierce fighting continues at what remains of Donetsk airport, with at least 6 Ukrainian servicemen killed in the space of 24 hours. And a big blow for Kyiv, its forces have had to withdraw from the main terminal. It looks like a sieve and there's simply nowhere to hide there, said a spokesman. Ukraine's government insists that other parts of the airport are still under its control.
Foreign ministers from Germany, France, Russia and Ukraine have announced some progress at urgent talks in Berlin on the crisis in eastern Ukraine. A procedures for the withdrawal of heavy weapons from lines has been proposed, which should establish security zones between pro-Russian fighters and Kiev's forces. Karim Fazakri again.
Foreign ministers from Germany, France, Russia and Ukraine have announced some progress at urgent talks in Berlin on the crisis in eastern Ukraine. A procedure for the withdrawal of heavy weapons has been proposed, which should establish security zones between pro-Russian fighters and Kiev's forces. Germany's Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier spoke for his colleagues.
After the meeting of the contact group, we will see whether it actually comes to a withdrawal of heavy weaponry. We're relying on this and on Russia in particular, which has agreed to exercise the necessary leverage on the separatists in East Ukraine.
Serious concern was also expressed that fighting in eastern Ukraine had severely escalated, causing the loss of many human lives, in particular around Donetsk airport, which was built just 3 years ago and has become the symbol of the broader fight still raging in spite of ceasefire first signed in Minsk last September. On Wednesday, Ukraine media sources said that rebels had finally overrun the facility, citing dozens of unconfirmed casualties among Ukrainian troops. Kyiv has repeatedly called on Russia to withdraw its troops from eastern Ukraine, accusing it of having more than 9,000 tanks and other heavy weapons in the region, something which Moscow denies. Ministers admitted that more tangible progress would have to be made before the next planned summit could take place.
Now in our sports file, the national football squad underwent a full training session at the municipal stadium of Montgomery in Equatorial Guinea. The training session, set up by the national coach Christian Gourcuff, was devoted to trying different tactical strategies. It was also the case to try on new players, notably with the view to strengthen the defence line that performed rather poorly against the Bafana Bafana of South Africa last Monday. Algeria, leader of Group C with 3 points, will take on the Black Stars of Ghana on Friday as part of the ongoing African Cup of Nations 2015, now hosted by Equatorial Guinea. Still with sports now, the national handball squad is looking determined to seal its first win when they clash with France as part of the ongoing 24th Handball Championship in Doha, Qatar. The Algerian team looks to bounce back after losing 3 times in a row against Egypt, Iceland and the strong Scandinavian team Sweden. Algeria stands at the bottom of the group with 0 points. And that's the end of our news in English. Thank you for watching.